Ruth Callahan set the table for 4 every Sunday. She had done this for 41 years. 4 plates, 4 glasses, 4 sets of silverware arranged with the particular precision of a woman who had grown up in a house where the table setting was the first indicator of whether things were under control, and things in Ruth Callahan's house were always under control, or at least always appeared to be, which she had learned early was nearly the same thing. The 4 plates were for herself, her husband Gerald, and their 2 children, first Danny and Claire, who had grown from small people who needed their food cut into manageable pieces into large people who had lives in other cities and came home when they could, which was not as often as Ruth would have liked, but more often than she admitted she needed. Then after Gerald died, 11 years ago, and Danny and Claire's visits became the fixed points around which the rest of Ruth's weeks organized themselves, the 4 plates became 3 and then 2, and then, on ordinary Sundays when neither child came, 1, except that wasn't what happened. What happened was that Ruth continued to set 4 plates. She did this without deciding to. The first Sunday after Gerald's funeral, she had gone to the cabinet and taken out 4 plates, which she only understood she had done when she was standing at the table and noticed the extra one. She had stood looking at it for a moment. Then she had set it in its place and put a glass above it and silverware on either side, and she had eaten her dinner alone at a table set for 4, and then cleared 3 plates and washed them and put them away. She did not examine this. Ruth Callahan was not, by nature or by practice, a woman who examined things that were working. The 4 plates were working. She didn't know exactly what they were working toward, but they were working, and that was sufficient. Danny knew about the plates. He had noticed on his first visit after Gerald died, had come home to find the table set for 4, his father's place included, and had said nothing because he was 29 and had no idea what to say, and because his mother's face in those early months had the quality of a person walking very carefully across ground they were not certain would hold, and Danny did not want to be the person who asked a question that caused her to look down. He mentioned it to Claire on the phone that night. Claire said, "Leave it." Danny said, "Don't you think it's—" "Leave it," Claire said again. "She knows what she's doing." Danny had left it. He had come home 4 times that first year, and each time the table was set for 4, and each time he sat in his usual seat and ate his mother's cooking and did not mention the 4th place setting, which was for a man who was not there, and whom Danny missed with a specific physical ache that he had not expected, grief to feel like, and which had not diminished. In the 11 years since, Claire came home less than Danny. She lived in Phoenix, farther, busier, 2 children of her own and a job that had grown in the years since Gerald died until it occupied most of the available space. She called every week. She visited at Christmas and usually in the summer. She carried the particular guilt of the child who moved furthest away before learning that distance, once established, tends to compound. Ruth never mentioned the guilt. She also never entirely absolved it, which was perhaps more honest. On a Sunday in March, and 11 years after Gerald, in a house in Boise, Idaho that had grown quieter each year in the way that houses grow quiet when the people they were built around have moved outward into their own lives, Ruth set the table for 4 and sat down and looked at Gerald's plate and understood, with a clarity that arrived without warning and without the drama she might have expected, that something had changed. Not about Gerald, not about grief, about the plate itself. For 11 years, the 4th plate had been Gerald's. She had not thought of it this way exactly, had not sat down each Sunday and consciously dedicated a place setting to her late husband, but it had been his, implicitly, in the same way that his armchair in the living room was still his, and the side of the closet where his clothes had been was still his, even though the clothes were long donated and the closet now held her off-season things. Today the plate felt different. Today it felt like space, like a place held open not for someone who was gone but for someone who might come, like a table that had room at it, which was a different thing from a table with an empty chair. Ruth sat with this for a long time over her Sunday dinner. Then she called her neighbor Patricia. Patricia was 72, Ruth's age, and had lived 2 houses down for 16 years and had the quality of a friend who tells you true things without requiring that you immediately know what to do with them. She came over on Tuesday mornings for coffee with the consistency of someone who has decided that a person who lives alone should have at least one scheduled human presence per week, which Ruth found slightly managing and also entirely welcome. Ruth told her about the plate. Patricia listened, with the specific attentiveness of someone who understands that what a person is describing is usually not entirely what they are describing. When Ruth finished, Patricia said, "What would it mean to invite someone to fill it?" Ruth said, "I don't know. I've been setting the table for 11 years, and it's never occurred to me that 4 was an invitation rather than a habit. Maybe it was a habit that became an invitation," Patricia said. "Things do that." Ruth thought about this for several days. Her daughter Claire called on a Sunday evening in April. It was a longer call than usual. Claire's calls had a specific architecture: 15 minutes, news about the grandchildren, news about Claire's work, questions about Ruth's health that were genuinely concerned but also slightly efficiently expressed. Goodbye. This call was different. Claire asked about 20 minutes in how Ruth was really doing. Not "How are you, Mom?" which Ruth could answer on autopilot. "How are you really?" Ruth said, "I've been thinking about the plates." A brief silence. "The 4 plates?" Claire said. "Yes." "You still do that?" "Every Sunday for 11 years, Ruth said. Claire was quiet for a moment. Ruth could hear her daughter doing something she almost never did in their phone calls, which was simply sitting with something rather than moving through it. "Mom," Claire said finally, "I want to come home. Not Christmas now, just like soon." "You don't have to do that," Ruth said. "I know I don't have to," Claire said. "I want to." There was something in Claire's voice that Ruth recognized as a version of her own voice from 30 years ago, the voice of a person who has just understood something about time and is making a correction. Ruth had made this same correction at various points in her life, and she knew the particular quality of it, the mix of clarity and slight grief that comes from realizing something you should have seen earlier and choosing to act on it now, rather than waiting for an even later moment that will feel the same way but with less time remaining. "Come whenever you want," Ruth said. "I'll set a place." Claire came in May. Not just Claire. Claire's husband Mark and their 2 children. Lily, who was 14 and had her grandfather's eyes in a way that still caught Ruth off guard sometimes, and Sam, who was 11 and had decided at age 8 that great-grandma Ruth's house was his favorite place in the world for reasons he couldn't articulate but which had something to do with the kitchen and the backyard and the specific quality of being in a house where someone was genuinely happy you had arrived. Danny drove up from Salt Lake City, a 4-hour drive he made without being asked. Just texted Ruth, "Coming for the weekend if that's okay." Ruth had texted back, "Of course. I'll set a place." On Sunday morning, Ruth went to the cabinet. She stood there for a moment. Then she began taking out plates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. She took out 6 plates and enough for herself. And Danny and Claire and Mark and Lily and Sam, and she carried them to the table and set each one with the precision she had maintained for 41 years. And she put glasses above them and silverware on either side, and she stepped back and looked at the table. It was the fullest it had been in 11 years. It was not Gerald's 4th place. It had never been only Gerald's 4th place. She understood this now. Standing in the kitchen doorway, looking at 6 plates on a Sunday morning in May. The 4th place had been a held space, a practice of expectation, a refusal to set the table only for what was certain, and a quiet insistence on leaving room for what might come. It had looked like grief because grief was part of it, but it had also been something else. A woman who set the table for more than she had because she believed, without examining it, that more would come. More had come. Danny was in the backyard with Sam throwing a baseball. Claire and Mark sat at the kitchen table with coffee, talking in the easy way of people who have been married long enough to talk while also doing other things. Lily was on the porch reading with the complete absorption of a 14-year-old. who has discovered that books are portable worlds, which was something Ruth had known since she was 12 and which made Lily, in Ruth's view, a person of excellent judgment. The kitchen smelled like the Sunday dinners it had always smelled like. Ruth went back to the stove. She cooked for 6. She had always known how and had scaled the recipes up and down across 41 years of different-sized tables, and she cooked with the particular efficiency and pleasure of someone doing the thing they are made for, in the company of people they love. On an ordinary Sunday that is not ordinary at all. They ate for 2 hours. They talked over each other and passed dishes, and Sam ate 3 helpings of everything. And Lily said something that made Danny laugh so hard he had to put his fork down, and Claire looked at her mother across the table with an expression Ruth recognized as the one Claire's face made when she was memorizing something. Ruth looked back at her. 6 plates on the table. 6 glasses. 6 sets of silverware. Not one too many. Exactly enough.